imposter syndrome and are you an imposter? We have Denise Jones, who's a product manager from Expedia. She's been with the company for 6 years, transferred 3 years ago over from their Seattle office, and here she does work with Hotels.com and Expedia.com. So give her a round of applause, and let's get started on this great session.
Hi everyone, as she said, I'm Denise Jones. I work with Expedia. Make sure you book all of your travel on Expedia. So, by the way, if anyone has a spare seat next to them, can you raise their hand? Looks like people are still looking for spare seats. All right, how helpful. Okay, so I'll start talking a little bit about me. So I've been in the Seattle tech industry and the London tech industry now for 20 years. And I'm one of those people, I'm an annoying fitness fanatic. Like one summer I decided I wanted to do one triathlon a week for the summer, and I ended up doing about 50. I started a catering company from the ground up with my chef husband. We ran it for about 6 years. I love to travel. I've traveled to over 70 countries. I hit 70 this weekend. We went to Macedonia. So that's my way of saying that I have never really had a problem with imposter syndrome or confidence. It's always kind of been my unthinking assumption that wherever I am, I belong there. It's like that American thing of I am awesome, right? So an example of this. So when I was at university in Seattle, I decided that I wanted to work for a cruise ship that did a little cruise around the bay. It's a 3-hour cruise, just like Gilligan's Island, and they were hiring singing waitresses. Now, I've never done this, but I thought, you know, that would be perfect. So I went and auditioned, and I did my little thing, and turns out I have this really bizarre ability to be able to hit a perfect C without any prompting whatsoever. And really, that's all they needed because they were hiring a Christine for Phantom of the Opera. So I got hired. They spent about 3 weeks training me on my steps and my lines and the music. And then they sent me home, and I didn't hear from them for like a month, right? And so I get a call around about 4 o'clock in the afternoon one day, and they said, Denise, we really need you. Can you be Christine? And I said, here's the thing. I'm going to be honest. I haven't practiced at all. I kind of forgot everything you taught me. So I have no problem showing up making a fool of myself. Is that okay with you? And they said, can you hit that high C? And I said, that's no problem. So I went there that night. I kind of bumbled around. I'm sure a lot of people wanted some refunds that night. But when the time came for me to hit that high C, I hit it so perfectly that there was a guy in the front row who I malfunctioned his hearing aid with my microphone. And I swear that was like one of the greatest events of my life. So that long-winded story is my way of saying that I've always been really comfortable with what my abilities are, and when I am not good at something or I don't know it, I have no problem admitting it. But then, hang on, I'm figuring out how to use this. Something changed, right? I moved to London. By the way, that photo is not photoshopped. That is actually me fit inside there. So, all of a sudden, I am a foreign imposter, right? After a lifetime in Seattle, where I've been comfortable with my culture, the geography, my friends, the customs, and even the money, I suddenly am a stranger in a strange land. And I live here. Nothing is familiar. I have a new job, I have new friends, or lack of them. I have a new country, I have a new home, but I'm expected just to live and act as if I belong here, right? But something else happened as well. I suddenly became in constant contact with people who told me regularly that I don't belong here, that I didn't know how to do what I was brought here to do and I wasn't good enough. And so for the first time in my life, that actually got in my head. Do I belong here? Am I competent? And the answer all around that I kept hearing was no. Excuse me. So I'm one of those people who believes that Googling and researching can solve everything. So I feel like I had this really demoralizing mindset. And so I Googled what it was. And I discovered it's imposter syndrome. So what is it? In a nutshell, instead of embracing the fact that we're responsible for our successes, imposter syndrome makes us think irrationally about our abilities and our performance. And it's really more than a lack of confidence. It's a deep feeling that you don't belong where you are, that you're unworthy of your success, and everybody knows, and you're going to get found out. So XKCD is the greatest cartoon that ever has been and ever will be. I highly recommend you subscribe to it. They encapsulated imposter syndrome in the best cartoon I've ever seen. So I'll let you read that for a sec. So, what is imposter syndrome? It's really more than just a lack of confidence, right? You're unable to take credit for your accomplishments. You have this persistent fear of being found out as a fraud. And despite ample evidence of competence, you believe that you don't deserve your success. And even worse, you dismiss your success as luck or timing or somebody else helped you. Or the worst, I think, is you believe you've tricked people into thinking you're smarter than you are. So, I'm a child of the 80s, and that's an 80s reference, by the way. So, I want to stop right here. Before today, how many of you have heard about imposter syndrome? Okay, good. So we're all talking about it. So there is one thing I have never heard about imposter syndrome that I would like to bring up right now. I am really, really tired of hearing that imposter syndrome is a result of women criticizing ourselves or our inherent lack of confidence. Because for me, that isn't me, and I'm sure it's not a lot of you either. Women are not naturally unconfident, right? I literally had people telling me that I wasn't any good and I wasn't competent. So I think it's important for us to know that it isn't always your fault and your self-criticism that leads to imposter syndrome. It gets in your head whether it's from inside or outside. So when you're surrounded by people like I was, who insinuate that thing, that will get in your head as much as any self-critical voice that you might have. But most importantly, however it got in your head, it is up to us to get it out. So, do you think you're an imposter? Do you think things like this? I feel like a fake. Somebody is going to notice I shouldn't be here, or I shouldn't be doing this. I got lucky. Everyone else is so much more accomplished than I am. I don't know enough to speak or lead confidently. I don't deserve that compliment, or I don't deserve that credit. So this is my totally legit graph that I made this morning before I got here. Totally legit, I swear. The truth is, over 70% of people are going to experience imposter syndrome at one point in their lives. Now, back in the 80s, some American researchers discovered this as a thing, and they quite clearly said in their report, it's a female experience. And so this is what it was originally thought to be, but now we know men and women struggle equally with imposter syndrome. The big difference is, men are generally more afraid to talk about feeling like a fraud, and they're way less likely to admit it. So why is this? In general, boys are raised to show assertiveness and leadership. Girls are kind of taught to distrust their own opinions, stifle their voices, and defer to other people. And that leads to, we have a tendency to discount our accomplishments. And men, when men accomplish things, they tend to attribute it to internal things, their training, their hard work, their knowledge. In general, when women accomplish things, we tend to attribute it to external sources. I had a good connection, I was lucky, I have friends who helped me out, right? So, because women do this, our confidence tends to be a bit lower than men's overall. But for me, what really led to mine, gender bias tends to trivialize or devalue a woman's work far more than a man's. And I think that's pretty important as well. So men and women struggle with imposter syndrome at the same rate, but in general, women also struggle more with confidence. So what happens if you feel you're suffering from imposter syndrome? That's a lot of scary words, right? So you're going to find that you're going to refrain from applying for jobs or promotions or other employment opportunities that could really move your career along. You might refrain from submitting papers or ideas to speak to your professional groups. You might find yourself underestimating or disclaiming your experience or your skills when you talk to people or in your writing. If you're offered promotions or speakerships or leadership opportunities, you're probably going to say no because you don't feel you've earned that. You might display a lack of confidence when you talk to others who are also in your field, especially if you feel that they're more accomplished than you are. You might feel like a fraud. You might over-prepare for tasks. You're probably going to worry that someone's going to find you out and even fire you. And as I'm sure you can guess, living with that kind of fear leads to a much higher stress level. All right, so that's not working. Okay. So, of all those things, these are the ones that I was dealing with. I was starting to actually display a lack of confidence. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was no longer confident in my professional knowledge and my experience. I started shying away from professional networking gatherings, usually that I love to go to, because I realized in retrospect I was getting scared of being exposed by people. And I constantly looked for and therefore found the many differences between myself and my peers. And then I used those reasons and those differences to start believing that I really didn't belong there. And I started feeling like a fraud for the first time in my life. I had this pervasive feeling of not being qualified. And after a while, this really drains you because you run out of energy to prove otherwise to yourself. And if you're not careful, that can start to become your own truth. And I started to over-prepare like crazy. I would spend literally hours on meaningless emails and inconsequential slides because I realized if I made one little mistake, I was worried someone was going to find me out. And honestly, I was pretty worried that someone was going to find out my lack of qualifications. I mean, I was being told regularly, I don't know how to do my job. So, if you suffer from imposter syndrome, it's going to make you far more risk averse and far less self-promoting. And that's going to derail your future success. Because really, those are the two qualities you're going to need to move your career forward. You need to take risks, and you need to be your own best promoter. So, as I said, Googling and researching is my easiest way to deal with things. And I started to think, if 70% of us at one time or another have experienced imposter syndrome, then I'm quite certain it's probably affected people that I know of and probably people that I admire. So I did my research. And I found this one. I have written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find me out. I've run a game on everybody. That's Maya Angelou. She's an American poet laureate. She wrote this amazing book called I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. She actually did poetry for Bill Clinton's inauguration, so she's a very accomplished author. No matter what we've done, there comes a point where you think, how did I get here? When are they going to discover that I'm a fraud? If they catch me at faking it, well then it's just doomsday. That's Tom Hanks. He was a back-to-back Oscar winner, and in 2016 he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Internally, you know you're not skilled, experienced, or ever qualified enough to justify being here. Most days, I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing. Now, you may not recognize this man's face. Does anybody recognize this man? Oh, good for him. You're going to recognize his products. This is Mike Cannon-Brooks. He's the Atlassian CEO. So if you use Jira or Confluence, this is the man responsible. I just look at these people and I think, what the heck am I doing here? They've made amazing things. I just go where I was sent. This one's pretty surprising. That's Neil Armstrong. He's an American astronaut and the very first person on the moon. There are an awful lot of people out there who think I'm an expert. How do these people believe all this about me? I'm so much aware of things I don't know. Anybody recognize her? I did, yeah. This one should terrify you. This is Dr. Margaret Chan, the chief of the World Health Organization, the woman who's going to be in charge of stopping any Ebola epidemic. Feels like an imposter at times as well. And this one broke my heart. This person is a massive personal hero of mine. I am always looking over my shoulder, wondering if I measure up. Now, if you don't know who that is, that's Sonia Sotomayor. She is only one of 4 women in my country's entire history who's ever sat on the Supreme Court, and she's also the first Latina. feel as if you are suffering from imposter syndrome, what do we do to get past it? The number one thing is talk about it openly with peers, mentors, anybody. Because the more we talk about it, we're gonna realize all of us are dealing with this, right? Start observing confident people around you that you want to emulate, model their behavior. And if you meet a confident person who impresses you, ask them, have you ever suffered from imposter syndrome? If so, how did you deal with it? I found it really helpful to make a list of my accomplishments, to keep track of all positive feedback in a file. And when you start to feel like this, read it. Because it's not a lie, it's the truth. And read it. It's important to develop a really strong support system. And make it of people who can give you good feedback based on your actual performance and who believe in you. If you're invited to do something like speak at a conference or apply for a job, say yes, because you have to remember, if someone's asking you to do that, they obviously think you're qualified, so you obviously should think that as well. When you talk in networking events or in letters or emails, do not minimize your accomplishments. Really watch your use of the words just or only. Oh, I just did that. Well, I was only a small part of it. Watch those words. Let's see if my scroll bar will work. Nope, still not. Okay. So, how did I deal with it? In the words of someone I really admire, and in fact, I think she's talking here in about 3 hours. Her name is Ariane Gorin. I got myself a posse. In fact, some of the posses in this room, that's how awesome you guys are, I began to surround myself with people who saw me as I should be seen, who saw me as capable and intelligent. I had to remind myself that my company would not have sent me across the ocean to work here if I weren't competent. Now, I had to put the hard work in. And I also learned, you can put the hard work in, gain respect from your peers, and still not be able to get to people who think that you're incompetent. That's okay. I also learned, don't spend more than 1 minute working for people who don't agree with you and who don't believe in you. So, final thoughts. You don't have to attain mastery to be worthy of the success that you've achieved. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy of these accolades that you earn. And most importantly, and this was a big one for me, just as we take responsibility for our failures in life, we also get to take responsibility for our successes. So the truth is, everyone who's successful owes some of their success to luck. Everyone who is successful owes some of that to hard work. Everyone is faking it at one point or another. In fact, as one of my mentors used to say, fake it till you believe it yourself. All right. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Woo! Woo!
Thank you, Denise. We're going to be taking questions from the audience inside the app. At the moment, we don't have any, so if you'd like to log any questions you might have for Denise, we'll pick them up and make sure that they get asked and cover off any remaining points that anybody would like to make. Don't think we have any coming in. Lady in the front.
What did it trigger the imposter syndrome in your case?
I'm sorry?
What was the trigger?
I think for me, I grew up in Seattle. I've lived my whole life there except for a couple of years in California. Suddenly being dropped somewhere that everything was unfamiliar other than my husband and my cat. It was so bad for me. I remember breaking down the night we moved here in Sainsbury and crying because I couldn't understand the coins. I don't go to that Sainsbury anymore, don't get me wrong. But when there's so much unfamiliar and there's nothing that makes you feel like you belong, and then you have a bit of an environment where people tell you that as well, that really triggered it for me. But it was a slow boil. I didn't realize until months later what was going on in my head.
Hello? Oh, hello. Can I just ask, I'm over here.
Oh, thank you.
You talked about coming from Seattle to London. Do you think this kind of conditioning of women is more of a British cultural problem than maybe it was in Seattle? Or is it just you didn't get hit with it when you were in Seattle? What's the difference?
I noticed when I got here that it's about 10 to 15 years behind Seattle. That the stuff I remember dealing with in the early 90s was happening here. So it's the same, it's just catching up a little bit more slowly. But I've always been a woman in tech, and it never occurred to me not to be. And I couldn't understand why you would be discouraged. It just didn't occur to me, which is why this whole imposter syndrome thing was like so different for me. Because I've always kind of felt like this is what I'm doing, I'm here.
Do I need a microphone?
I think she's coming. Oh,
Hi, I was just wondering, have you got any advice in terms of identifying imposter syndrome in others, for example, members of your team or something like that, and how you can support them and help them? Obviously, you've talked a lot about what you can do for yourself. What can you do for others?
I think it's really important to literally invite people to the table. President Obama did this. He noticed that the women were sitting on the exterior of the room, like if you had chairs outside the table, that's just what they would do naturally. And he started literally saying, come to the table, bringing their voices in. I have some team members who are just naturally more quiet and more questioning of themselves. And I find myself in meetings saying, what do you think? And forcing them to speak up, put in their input. And it's important to me to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak up and just feel like they're worth being heard. So, I mean, you can draw that out, like amplify people's voices. I think we had someone here who wanted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much for your talk. It was very important for me to hear that you started identifying it when you moved from your homeland to a different culture. I never thought about it, and I have changed a number of countries, and I never thought that that could have been actually the contributing factor to the way that I felt, because I've changed so many different cultures. I didn't even realize I felt that way until very recently. So my question, to cut everything short, my question is that if you're ever going to bring that up with your manager, with your mentor, or whoever, how do you overcome the fear that it might actually affect your performance? If they don't understand what the imposter syndrome is, what if they look at it as sheering confidence in doing what you're doing?
Well, that's literally exactly what happened. I don't know how to answer that. My answer was find someone who believes in me and I would have a better experience working for. Because I don't think you convince people otherwise. I mean, some people, they say you have like 5 seconds to make an impression. And I think that's true with managers as well. I mean, I think like the first day or so you work, that's how that's how some will see you, and there's not much else you can do. So I mean, you have to take charge of yourself and find someone who sees the way you need to be seen and the honest way to be seen.
We have about 4 minutes left for a final question. If there's anybody towards the back of the room, maybe on the side.
If you could shout,
Yes,
I'll repeat.
And so what was the breaking point when you finally realized that something is going in your head and you very likely got the imposter syndrome and everything? Where did you actually start to deal with the problem?
I honestly think it was from my husband, because I kept relating my days of, they weren't super positive, and I'm a pretty optimistic, positive person. And I remember he literally rolled his eyes and went, since when has confidence been your problem? And it's true, that's never really been my issue. I've got a lot of them, but that was never one of them. So it kind of got me thinking, why am I seeing myself differently? Why am I feeling differently about my work and my days? And I'm kind of introverted that way and started thinking about it, and it just started like percolating a little, and hence I hit the internet and realized, oh, it's a thing, it's not just me.
And how long did it take for you to become your normal confident self again? Like, so on.
How long did it take for you to become your normal, confident self again?
I don't know, it's hard to say. I started taking on other activities. We have a women in Expedia group called Well, that with two people who, well, one's no longer with the company, but the three of us decided we wanted to restart Women at Expedia, and to me that was a place to take leadership and to help other people with the same issues I was sensing. So I think it was more like reaching out for me and starting a project that I could have a positive influence on and positively drive that sort of made me feel more like myself again.
This is a bit more of a comment than a question. I wanted to pick up on your comment about not staying where you are not listened to and supported. I had a situation where I thought I was doing a really great job for a chief executive as his EA, and he made me feel like an imposter and gradually kind of wore me down over the period of a year. And there's only one thing you can do, and it's leave.
Oh,
and
exactly.
I did.
Because it gets in your head, right? Yeah.
That got me into tech. I'm now supporting and working for an amazingly supportive manager, so it's kind of built me back up. But I just wanted to take the opportunity to reiterate how important it is not to stay where it's wrong.
Yeah. My mentor said to me when I was talking about this, she's like, Denise, do not work 5 minutes for someone who doesn't believe in you. She's like, what are you doing? And you know, after a while it gets in your head and you think, that's kind of how you deserve to be treated at work, that's all you're worth. So yeah, luckily, if you can have people around you who tell you the truth as it truly is, that's a very valuable, useful thing.
Hey, I work at hotels.com, so another Expedia group person. A lot of what you said really resonated with me, and I find myself putting down my accomplishments in meetings and being presented, and it sometimes feels like a fine line, like two extremes between putting myself down and downplaying those accomplishments, and on the other side, arrogance. And I'm wondering if you've ever felt that way, thinking like, okay, so if I admit that it's a positive, I'm being arrogant.
You know, it's funny, a lot of women ask that question in places, conferences like this, and honestly, you're never sounding arrogant. That is not our problem. It's a bit like in the keynote where they said, are you worried about leaving men behind? And the answer is, that's not really something we should be worried about right now. The people who are sounding arrogant aren't asking themselves that. So, I mean, honestly, what you think probably sounds arrogant is probably sounding confident.
One last question.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, I'm Laura.
Hello.
I've had similar experience to some others that have said they've been in situations where they weren't valued by their team, and in particular, one woman I worked with, a bit of a mean girls situation going on, but it just got me wondering, perhaps you have any tips as we're considering our own worth and promoting ourselves. I was wondering, perhaps she wasn't even doing it consciously, and is there anything you would suggest in not only bolstering our own confidence, but being careful not to diminish the confidence of other women who might be on our team?
For me, amplifying voices has been one of the most supportive things. Like when you're in a meeting, how many times has this happened to one of us? You say something and no one really notices, and some other guy in the room goes, hey, I have an idea, and literally says what you just said. And I mean, I worked with a dev lead who's about 10, 15 years younger than me, and he's like, God, you're in a bitchy mood today. I said, you know why I'm in a bad mood? A lifetime of dealing with shit like that. So when you're in that group and some woman has a great idea, you know what you should do? Say, hey, she had a really good idea. I agree with what she says. And that's amplifying your voice. It helps, it lifts everybody, it makes you look like a good team player, and it really helps that woman as well. And it'll teach other people, do the same for you. So yeah, we gotta support each other.
Thank you everyone for your questions.
Thank you.